welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at VikingsTerritory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and we're here talking the Vikings-Seahawks matchup. Obviously, the Vikings went down 20-13 in the preseason, second week. Not a whole lot to take away from this game, as it is, again, as always, only 2 weeks into the preseason here. But both Drew and I have had some kind of scheduling issues lately with the late game. So we're here and we're kind of combining this episode as both the immediate recap and the analysis episode from this most recent preseason game. So we'll do everything we can to break down everything from Sam Bradford all the way down to Taylor Heineke here. And then later on this week, we'll start talking about San Francisco. And obviously we have that live show at Black Stack Brewing on the 27th for that San Francisco 49ers game. So make sure to check that out. And let's get this word from our sponsor out of the way here, and then we'll jump into some Vikings football stuff. So, Black Stack Brewing is brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul with a wide range of clean, flavorful brews and a massive bright tap room. Perfect for intimate settings all the way to special events. Black Stack Brewing, 755 North Pryor, just north of Menards, off of University Avenue there. And then also shout out to our sponsor, the Twin Cities Directory, the best way to explore delicious bites and fun-filled nights that Minneapolis and St. Paul have to offer. Check it out at www.twincities.directory. That's www.twincities.directory, helping you discover the real Twin Cities. All right, Drew, let's start with the first team offense. Sam Bradford and Stephon Diggs seem to be in unison throughout that initial couple of drives there. Seattle came out humming it, obviously. They had a very strong initial effort with Russell Wilson at the helm against our first-team defense. Let's start with the first-team offense, though, and Sam Bradford and Stephon Diggs and co. What are your immediate takeaways from that unit and what they were able to accomplish in, I guess, a little bit more work than I think we probably expected?
Yeah, I think the first thing I noticed was the rhythm and the continuity and just kind of I guess they were more comfortable than they were against Buffalo, and even against what I would assume most people think is a more elite defense in Seattle. But Sam Bradford took a few shots down the field, which people, it's really weird. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of say this right away. So Sam Bradford took that shot in one-on-one coverage against Stephon Diggs. I believe that was in the second quarter in his last series. It was contested one-on-one coverage against Sherman, which, the placement wasn't very good. It was kind of inside, and on those situations you want to go back shoulder. But I think the idea was to go back shoulder. And in a one-on-one coverage against your number one receiver, why is that a bad idea? Because people have been on Bradford over and over since he joined the league, but more particularly since he joined the Vikings, about checking down too often. So now he takes a shot downfield, probably 25 air yards on this ball,
something like
down
that,
down the right sideline, and it ends up incomplete. And again, placement was bad, but I thought the decision was good.
Yeah, I did too.
And all of a sudden, people are ripping him for the decision to throw to tight single coverage against Richard Sherman, which obviously that's a tough matchup for anybody. But so what do you want him to do? It was 4 verts against cover 1. All these guys are going down the field, single coverage,
Yeah.
You take a shot with your number one receiver, one-on-one, or you check it down to Dalvin Cook out of the backfield, short of the sticks.
Yeah.
There's no way he can win there.
This is a you can't have your cake and eat it too type of scenario, right? Obviously, had that ball been caught, had Stephon Diggs adjusted better to the ball. I mean, that ball wasn't well thrown. Obviously, this is the play down the sideline that Drew's talking about, where Richard Sherman kind of got his hand in there last second, was able to break it up, and it almost looked like Sherman could have picked this ball off because he got out around the route at the top of the route before Diggs did. It seemed like the throw kind of caught Diggs a little bit off guard, so there's somewhat of miscommunication there. But I think Drew makes a good point in that, everyone's getting on Bradford for not throwing it. At least he took a shot, right? At least he took a shot downfield trying to get that first down instead of doing the casual dump off, which he still did some of that, and to some degree it was effective. I want to point out that the screen game, not just Bradford, simply how the Vikings are setting up screens, they need to improve on that dramatically. We saw Dalvin Cook get kind of it looked like he was kind of tripped over one of his offensive linemen. I think it was Elfline actually that he tripped over, and then we also saw Keenum try to throw a screen pass to. I can't remember if it was. I don't think it was Cook out there anymore. It's probably McKinnon at this point. But either way, the Vikings were able to just not even complete a screen pass, which that's something that if this offense is going to be another high completion offense, with also mixing it in downfield. Obviously, Bradford was able to complete that ball downfield to Diggs on the left sideline against broken coverage. It's important to get that screen game down because that's going to be very important with a guy like Dalvin Cook who can catch the ball out of the backfield. But at the same time, I still do, I do kind of want to echo Drew's point here and really say that I completely agree with the decision. It didn't pan out, so we're not happy with the results. I mean, shocker, right?
Yeah, that's kind of how it is with Sam Bradford's entire career, really. When things don't go his offense's way, the quarterback gets the blame. But then, when things go right, it seems like he doesn't really receive the credit. So that's how it goes. That's how it went last year with the Vikings when the Vikings were 5-0. It seemed like it was all about the defense and wasn't about the Vikings scoring on offense, which, to be fair, a lot of those games were defensive points being scored. But bottom line here is I think there's no way Sam Bradford can win in that situation when you're blaming him for taking that shot deep down the field, but he's also getting blamed receiving a ton of heat, I guess is what I should say, when he does check down. So that was one thing I noticed, but obviously I think overall on offense, Dalvin Cook looks really good. He looks like a feature back, both in the receiving game and the run game. He looks natural as a receiver, catching and turning and running. And then he also, his vision, yes, his vision. There was one run too where he almost broke it. Earl Thomas made a tackle that saved, I think, a touchdown. But I think Berger came off a double team block with, I believe it was with Elfline, and crunched, I think, a linebacker and opened up a little hole for Cook, and he exploded through it for what I thought was about a 10-yard gain before Thomas was able to grab his ankles. But Dalvin Cook's vision and he just looks the part. Again, he looks the part of a feature back. He looks the part of a top flight producer, and he's a rookie, and he's been playing in the NFL for months. Well, really a couple weeks if you talk about just preseason games. Right. So he looks the part. I think the offensive line improved a ton this week. It looked a lot better. Pat Elflein especially. So the offense, very encouraging. Defense, not so much.
Yeah, let's talk more about Dalvin Cook, and then we'll get into that defensive side of the football. Dalvin Cook, man, you talked about the vision at the line of scrimmage, the patience, the decisiveness, being a one-cut runner up at the line of scrimmage. I mean, obviously the offensive line has to improve in order to open up those lanes, but Dalvin Cook has, I know people use this cliche a ton, the get skinny one, where you're able to, quote, thin yourself out and fit through small cracks. Dalvin Cook can absolutely do that, and he explodes through the small cracks as well, despite having that fairly big body frame that we talked about last week is helping him fall forward on runs. So you saw Dalvin Cook be very effective and consistent throughout the night, both as a receiver and as a rusher. I think there's a lot to be excited about here, and the longer the Latavius Murray sits, the more we see of Dalvin Cook. I think the more that Cook's role expands, and I think we've gotten to the point here where we very easily could see Dalvin Cook be that Week 1 starting featured back, with Latavius Murray being kind of the rotational guy that comes in and for situational football type things, because Dalvin Cook has been good across the board, not just as a rusher, not just as a pass catcher, but he's improving as a kind of a chip blocker, as in pass protection as well. So I was very impressed with Dalvin Cook once again. Honestly, this entire class has been very, very impressive, pretty much top to bottom here. I also thought Michael Floyd was great with the first team offense. I liked seeing him out there with the ones, so we could kind of get a feel for his game. It looked like Sam Bradford.
He was, I guess, in 11 personnel, he was the third receiver. About every time they went in that set, he was the guy there.
And he was making plays too. I think Bradford targeted him downfield as well on a ball that Floyd probably could have caught, and had it been a regular season game, I feel like he might have put a little bit more effort into making this catch. But I thought just overall the Vikings offense was, it hurt getting the false starts and the holding penalties and just the dumb penalties that back you up once you get into the red zone. But I thought for the most part the Vikings offense was able to answer Seattle's initial drive, and the first team offense against Seattle's first team defense. Overall, I'd probably give it a B grade. I thought it was okay. It was maybe a little bit above average. There's certainly room to improve, but I was very impressed with the offensive line. I thought they bounced back pretty nicely. I thought Sam Bradford had a nice game. Stephon Diggs showed his toughness on that over-the-middle catch where he got absolutely whomped. I believe that was Earl Thomas that hit him as well. I thought this team showed toughness, and I thought it showed passion, and I was very happy with the overall offensive performance.
Yeah, I mean, the next step now is, and it's kind of been the same theme for a couple years now, is getting 6 points instead of 3 when you get to the red zone. So that'd be the next step for the Vikings offense. But they moved the ball really well on those couple drives. Sam Bradford was comfortable. The offensive line gave him protection and time to throw. And Bradford shows mobility as well, moving around in the pocket quite a bit. And then obviously the running game has looked exponentially better in these first 2 preseason games. And it is only 2 preseason games, and essentially 2 full quarters now, or maybe 3 full quarters now of first team offense. So we don't want to overreact here too much, but it did look quite a bit better. I think Pat Elflein was really, really good in this game on the offensive line. So Easton too, moving over to left guard. So it's funny because they've both now played center and left guard with the ones, both of them now, I believe. Yeah. So throughout camp, throughout preseason. So
you could be pretty confident that Easton's going to make this team at this point, right?
Oh yeah, that's not in question. I do remember Zimmer saying that he wanted the offensive line to be solidified after this game. So Elflein playing center and starting at center, I think that kind of means he will be the center, and I think they'll use Easton as a backup interior or versatile interior offensive lineman. One thing also I want to note too, 10 offensive linemen played snaps in this game, and TJ Clemmings was not one of them. So maybe he's gone. I would assume that's what that means, because Aviante Collins was playing. A bunch of these other guys played snaps that are drafted.
You got to wonder how long the leash is for TJ Clemmings, right? I mean, I understand that he was thrown into the fire as a rookie. And
situation will always be one of the worst that any offensive lineman could really have ever been presented with.
Right.
But
he was not presented with an opportunity to succeed, really. Thrown into the fire, no doubt. But at the same time, at some point you got to get over the hump. You got to be able to get you need to get a good push, whether it's from the outside or the inside, and it just seems like, with guys like Easton seemingly taking a step forward here, we're seeing, better play from guys like Rashad Hill, who can represent your swing tackle. So you've basically got a swing guy on the inside and the outside now. I think you start feeling more and more comfortable with this offensive line, and moving forward here, that kind of leads you ultimately to get down to, would you rather keep Jeremiah Searles or TJ Clemmings? And at some point, you just kind of got to cut your losses and maybe just say, this guy probably is either not going to make it in this league, or at the very least, he's not going to make it here because he needs a new place. He needs to start over somewhere else. That's what TJ Clemmings needs at this point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some team that would take a flyer on him, given his athleticism and the upside that's still there, even though it didn't really show itself on the field the last couple of years. But I would assume some team, because he was a 4th-round pick in 2015, but he was looked at as a steal across the league. So there's got to be a team that would at least bring him into camp or something, or
you hope so, because he's a nice guy, smart guy too. So you hope that it all works out for him. But it's starting to look like you said,
he was never meant to be playing, starting left tackle for any team, let alone a playoff contention team like he was last season.
Absolutely. Yeah.
From there, it just all went downhill.
Kind of just spiraled for him. So, all right, let's talk about something else that kind of spiraled down. That was the Vikings defense early on in the game here.
Right.
Mackenzie Alexander, really tough night for him. I saw him get beat quite a bit. Honestly, Ben Gideon, not a great day in coverage. Running downhill as a run defender, I thought Gideon was very good. But there was a couple of plays where he allowed the tight end. I think Nick Vannett was kind of had the exemplary example here, where he was running a seam up the middle, and Ben Gideon didn't drop back far enough in coverage to allow his safety, which I believe it was Exum and Harris at the time, really to be able to cover that zone. He didn't drop back far enough in his zone, and kind of gave Vannett a free window, and obviously turned into something like a 2nd and 15, turned into a 1st and 10 real quick, with Vannett making a nice play over the middle. So Mackenzie Alexander, weak outing. Gideon, so. I like him more as a Mike. I continue to say that. Xavier Rhodes, I don't have a problem with the catch that Cason Williams put on him. I mean, that was one heck of a play. I thought Rhodes actually had pretty good coverage on it. Starting to get a little bit worried about Terrence Newman, noticing some trends with him not getting off the ball as quick, but the tackling tenacity is definitely still there with Newman. You notice that every single time a ball was caught on him, he was very rarely not the first guy at the scene of the crime. So I think that the cornerback issues for Minnesota are a little bit overblown right now, and I think part of that is people just worried about Trey Waynes' ability to be on the field this season. Sounded like during the broadcast that Paul Allen expects him to be back next week, so hopefully that PA's got that one on the money, and Trey Waynes will be back, and we can, start to, think of Newman more as a backup as opposed to being a starter, because it looked like he was having some real trouble out there.
Yeah, I mean, the secondary, I guess, cornerback depth has been an issue that I have kind of driven home all offseason here, is that bringing in a guy, especially at that slot position for depth, it's almost essential, given that Captain Munnerlyn was gone, and that's a position that, it's so important to a defense, and it's so easy for an offense to exploit if you have a guy there that's inexperienced. So Captain Munnerlyn's out of the picture. There was discussion of Terrence Newman moving in there as a backup to Alexander. Waynes maybe had some discussion, but Alexander was kind of always favored. And Alexander now, we kind of saw today, Doug Baldwin, bamboozled him a couple times for long gains. And Alexander just was lost. He was confused. He needed a map to find where he was supposed to be. And from there, where do you go if Alexander's not in the game? And then at the same time, Newman was, I think he was blasted by some receiver on after a long gain, I think, towards the sideline there. So he was brought out of the game. And then Marcus Sherrills was brought in as the next cornerback on the outside.
And Casey Williams got him good too.
They went to him twice in a row. The very next two plays, Sherrills in the game, they went right to him.
For what it's worth, Sherrills did make a nice play on the first.
The first time he did. The first time, then they went back right back to him and they scored. Yep. So if Marcus Sherrills is the next guy up when a starter gets hurt, then you have serious cornerback depth issues. So the Vikings either better A, get healthy, or B, pick somebody up like a Leon Hall or whatever it is. But they gotta address that somehow, some way.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people in my my Twitter notifications. Eric at Godlike0814, he said he's seriously concerned about the Vikings secondary. Says that Mac is 2 steps behind, and he was wondering about free agent options, I guess. Leon Hall, I agree with Drew, is probably the best one out there. We saw that Tremaine Brock ended up signing with Seattle in the week that obviously the Vikings fans started talking about Tremaine Brock possibly being in Minnesota. So that wasn't exactly great to see him out there in that purple and lime green. But, I do think to some degree that the cornerback outrage, I guess, is overblown. I said this before. I think once Trey Waynes gets back on the field and you realize that the fact that Rhodes shuts down one whole half of the field, and it's easier to accept the mistakes that Mackenzie Alexander is going to inevitably make. I mean, I don't think we should be blowing it out of proportion that his struggles, because he's going to have those struggles. Captain Munnerlyn had them in 2014 when he arrived with the team. That slot position is not easy to play. I think the best takeaway here is simply that Mackenzie Alexander still has a lot to learn, but we've seen some talent from him too. We've seen the athletic ability and his ability to, he can flex out to the outside as well. So we like that. He's obviously going to make this team. He's obviously probably going to be your starting slot nickel guy in that, when the 7-up look comes out and that double-A gap blitz look. I think Anton Exum has looked very good. I thought that he took advantage of the opportunity of Sendejo not flying with the team out to Seattle this week. So I like seeing that with Exum. But, I think that slot cornerback role, it leaves a lot to be desired right now. But I do think the rest of the defense is playing at a pretty high level. I think that we've gotten a lot more than we expected from guys like Eric Wilson especially. And also, I think that Ben Gideon's been a lot better than advertised as well. And then, of course, Drew's guy, Deshaun Bauer, has been exceptional. So, overall, I think the defense is playing. I mean, they only allowed 20 points. Granted, 2 of the touchdowns came against the first-/second team defense. You prefer to see better results than that, I guess. But I think that seeing guys like Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter, Linval Joseph, Anthony Barr, Rhodes, Harrison Smith, all playing. Eric Kendricks as well had a tackle for loss, I believe. All those guys playing at a high level. I think that there's more good to take away from this game than bad, to be quite honest.
Well, I mean, if for one thing, if Karen Williams doesn't make that spectacular catch against Rhodes down the sideline, which I believe was on a third down,
right.
That first scoring play doesn't happen. So let's keep that in mind, because I think Rhodes is in good position. That throw just was in the perfect place, and that catch with one hand is, I mean, you can't. That's one of those plays you can't really defend, you know.
Too perfect of a pass, too perfect of a catch. Right. Yeah.
But I will say, Danielle Hunter, I swear, on every pass play was in the backfield, disrupting Wilson, making him move, whether it meant step up in the pocket or whether it meant escape the pocket and improvise a little bit. But Hunter was there every time, and obviously that's against. I think it was against Jermaine Ifedi, which maybe some kind of asterisk needs to be added to this, but he was in the backfield against a starting NFL right tackle on nearly every play.
Yeah.
So that deserves enough credit as it is. And then moving on to kind of the reserves here, obviously Tayshaun Bauer, again, phenomenal performance. He has, I mean, through the 2 preseason games, he's probably the leader for Mr. Mankato for one thing, but he's also probably on the 53-man roster at this point.
Yeah, it's getting really hard to cut Tayshaun Bauer. You
can't.
You can't at this
I think
point.
You got to keep 5 defensive ends at this point.
It's
Weatherly and Bauer, right?
I mean, even with Weatherly, Weatherly has looked pretty good. I thought that he actually had a pretty solid game as well, but it's going to be a difficult decision to make, because you could hypothetically cut Weatherly, and I feel like Weatherly probably the safer cut at this point, because you've seen a lot more upside from guys like Tayshaun Bauer. Bauer really starting to look like a guy that could be a rotational guy with the ones at some point. I would like to see him get some tread against the number one offense. I mean, it is San Francisco next week, so number one offense. Consider it what it is.
Number 1.5 offense.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but I do think that Tayshaun Bauer is a lock at this point. I think the same can be said about Stacey Coley as well. I mean, how good has Coley been? He's been absolutely exceptional on the outside.
Right. He's been all right.
There was one play where he should have caught the ball and he didn't, where he didn't get his head around quick enough on a timing route.
Shaq Griffin on that route, by the way.
He did. That's the thing that translates to the NFL season with Stacey Coley, right? It's his route running. That type of fundamental footwork and the technique of being able to create separation at the stem of your route, that type of thing is what you watch for, because that type of stuff translates to the regular season. So if you do get into a pinch and you do need to throw out a guy like Stacey Coley during the regular season, you can expect this guy to bring fundamentals and technique and awareness of the playbook and his positioning on the field. I mean, he was able to find the soft spots and zones as well. I really think that this kid's been very impressive. I thought that Ifedi Odenigbo as well, another one of the 7th-round lottery tickets, he had a sack in this game. I thought that he was very impressive. But I want to talk about that Danielle Hunter sack a little bit more. It seemed like he was able to get Russell Wilson out of the pocket and out of his comfort zone, and then as Wilson was kind of doing his kind of trademark fake right and then go back around as he gotten around the pocket. You saw Danielle Hunter reach out with those long arms and just kind of bring him down strictly with his arms. This is one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL right now, arguably the most elusive quarterback that the NFL has to offer in Russell Wilson, and Danielle Hunter was able to kick him out of the pocket and force a throwaway at one point, and then also kick him out of the pocket and catch up to him to make a sack at another point. So this kid's going to be special. I'm really excited to see what Danielle Hunter has to offer, and I mean, Tayshaun Bauer did the exact same type of thing with Travoin Boykin in there, so it's kind of Danielle Hunter light and versus Russell Wilson light, and the team Danielle Hunter is easily getting the W, and that LSU pass rushing unit, those coaches down there at Louisiana State should be pretty happy with their kids right now.
I think we need to give some credit here to Andre Patterson before we move any further, because Danielle Hunter was like I don't know how to describe this, because both he and Bauer the comparison's made. It's been made all offseason that they both were like these athletic freaks with virtually no technique, I guess, out of LSU that didn't really play a lot. Their statistics didn't really show a whole lot.
Mojo, right?
Right. And Hunter just kind of had more. I think he was more pro ready, but it wasn't like he was, this first round prospect by any means. Still very raw, and I think he was just slightly above Bauer in that aspect. But both guys, Hunter obviously learned technique very quickly, very rapidly, and was a very significant contributor as a rookie. I think 8.5 sacks. Now Bauer comes in, really, really good camp, and now he's producing in the preseason. He's disrupting plays with consistency. I mean, and then let's also add in here Jaleel Johnson, another guy, another rookie out of Iowa who has
been outstanding,
unbelievable against the run. I think he had 5 run stops and like 15 snaps or something like that.
One tackle, big tackle for loss yesterday, in Seattle as well.
I mean, and he's just swiping guys right. I mean, he's moving right past guys with his hands. He's using the quick swipe that he made himself known for at Iowa. I mean, those guys are Bauer, Johnson, Hunter. I think you're kind of seeing how well technique is being taught on the defensive line. Yeah. It's unbelievable how well they're developing their skills, how rapid it is, and how they're translating it from camp practices or camp drills to the games. It's unbelievable. It's unreal to see, really.
Especially from these young guys, too. And on the flip side of that, it's kind of disappointing that guys like DeTone Jones and Will Sutton, not as much success. They're not DeTone Jones has been basically, non-existent from training camp through the preseason. And we here on the show kind of gave him a bit of a pass at training camp, especially because, it's difficult to stand out when you're on the interior. A lot of it is basically just getting a good push, which he's done to some degree. But when you start seeing guys like Jaleel Johnson really flash like considerably brighter than guys like DeTone Jones and Will Sutton, you have to start wondering, are these guys, what is their status? I mean, DeTone Jones has very quickly moved on to the roster bubble, I believe, through 2 weeks of the preseason so far.
Okay. I mean, I guess I don't disagree. I want to see more guys get some run with the first team. It's been Tom Johnson the entire time, and I mean, he's done a fine job. He's obviously a pass rushing kind of niche player.
Yep.
And which is kind of a compliment to Linval Joseph as just a big run stuffer, but I mean, he can also pass rush as well. But you'd like to see some other guys get run in there. Obviously, Jaleel Johnson's one of them. DeTone Jones, Shamar Stephen even. You want to see who can step up and play in that with the first team in the event of an injury or what have you. So I feel like Jaleel Johnson probably right now deserves that first go with the ones outside of Tom Johnson. And then from there, I think you have to give, DeTone Jones, Will Sutton, some other guys some runs so you know what you got and who you're going to keep in that spot. Because, again, you can't keep, Tom Johnson, Jaleel Johnson, Will Sutton, DeTone. You can't keep all those guys. You're going to have to cut somebody there. So they got to make that decision. And hopefully I would think they would try and base that off of who plays well with the ones, right? Who plays well with Linval.
Yeah, you'd expect so. I mean, we've talked about the idea of Tom Johnson potentially being a cut. I think that he's sort of through training camp and just into the preseason.
His roster spot is pretty safe.
Yeah, I would say that at this point now he's safe. He's obviously came back pretty strong from that hamstring injury, so I would say he's definitely safe. Will Sutton actually played pretty well with the threes towards the end of the game. I thought that he looked okay as an interior pass rush guy, but he has not stood out as much as I had hoped. I haven't been very impressed with him overall. Another guy that I haven't been impressed with, flipping back over to the offensive side of the ball and sort of special teams as well, Rodney Adams, man, another fumble returning kicks. I mean, he's sort of had that kick return label been stamped to his forehead since the moment he was drafted in the 5th round back in April, and I feel like he's only sort of lost sort of diminish that the chance of him going into the regular season as the number 1 kick returner through what has been kind of a difficult growing process in his first couple months in the NFL here.
It's been tumultuous, I would say. I mean, when we watched him, first of all, when we watched him return punts, receive kicks and punts, and he wasn't comfortable. We saw him drop one and fall to the ground, watching him try and negotiate the wind and field punts. And then as a receiver, it's just the way they're using him too. It's pretty clear that he's a gadget guy, which is fine if Pat Shurmur wants to have a gadget guy, and clearly only a gadget guy. And I've been strongly against that in the past with Cordero Patterson, that you have to have guys that can be a threat to do something other than be a gadget guy. But if Pat Shurmur wants to have a gadget guy on his team, then Adams is probably going to have a roster spot just by the way they're using him. But I think Stacy Coley is clearly the more polished receiver, the more versatile receiver.
Absolutely. And
the guy that, if you need a receiver to win a one-on-one route against an NFL defensive back, I think it's pretty clear that Coley would be the guy to have in your team over Adams. So, there is a role for Adams, I think. obviously as a kick returner, I think he's, despite the fumble, I still trust him. Just from a pure fundamental standpoint, the vision is there, the explosiveness is there. We know that.
Yep.
And then as a gadget guy, he's probably the guy as well that you keep on the roster. But I'm still not for that. I'd rather just let Coley be your guy that can also line up wide, let up in the slot, run a route, and beat a guy, and then also catch a bubble screen and take off with it. So
if the Vikings can throw bubble screens, if they can learn how to,
true,
if they can
line up and execute it, yeah.
I'm with you all the way on that. I think that Stacey Coley is definitively proven to me that he can play at the NFL level. I feel like if the Vikings were to cut him, that a team would swipe him for sure. I don't think that if you cut Stacey Coley, I feel like he's in a similar boat to Tayshaun Bauer, where he's proven that he can make a 53-man roster somewhere. And with slot receivers really becoming a big point of emphasis on teams like Dallas, for example. New England has been running it for years with Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, now Brandon Cooks probably. Stacey Coley definitely has a place in this league, and I think if the Vikings would be making a huge mistake cutting him, that's for sure. He's been extremely impressive. We always talk about the backup quarterback battle on this show.
Yeah.
Let's continue that discussion here. Obviously, this is the quarterback battle that matters, as I always introduce it. Not Sam Bradford versus Teddy Bridgewater, but Case Keenum versus Taylor Heineke. What did you think of the performance from both Case Keenum and Taylor Heineke against the Seattle Seahawks this week?
Well, overall, I didn't see a whole lot of good or bad. I mean, there was good and bad, but I think overall it was pretty average from both. I mean, if you take Heineke's those last two throws on that drive to Bucky Hodges, I think that kind of elevates him as to the greater performer of the two in the game.
Yeah.
But I think overall, Keenum was a little bit more erratic than he was, a little bit more uncomfortable than he was in the first game. Heineke was, I guess, a little bit more comfortable. He didn't. I mean, the bar was pretty low after that first game.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here. So. I don't think anything changes too much. I mean, I think the gap is, I guess, a little bit more narrow between Heineke and Keenum for that second spot. But outside of those two throws to Bucky Hodges, by the way, which were really good throws and had some velocity to them.
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, besides those two plays, there wasn't much that changes where each player's at in the spot. And I think right now Keenum is still easily the number 2 quarterback on this roster.
I would agree with you that Keenum definitely is probably the guy to beat at this point for that backup quarterback job. Despite my wishes, but I don't think that Keenum is doing anything to solidify that spot. I thought that he looked good at times, but at the same time, he looks like the same guy of old. I mean, this is the same Case Keenum that I think that we should be expecting to have. A guy that can move the football on short passes, struggles throwing downfield, struggles when the offensive line isn't protecting, and really is going to rely more on the run game to have success than throwing the ball downfield. That's just who Case Keenum is. Taylor Heineke, right, I think, proved in this game that he offers higher upside, but like you said, a little bit more erratic. The interception that kind of popped up on that slant to Isaac Frichte, I think that one's on Frichte personally. He's struggled obviously through camp and during the preseason as well, so not a huge shocker there to see Frichte kind of fumble that ball. And
he's not making the roster.
Yeah, he's really struggling. Yeah. I think that Heineke responded very well to throwing that interception, though. Obviously came down with a couple of strikes to Bucky Hodges down the middle of the field. Good to see Bucky Hodges, by the way, finally standing out a little bit, showing his ability to run that seam down the field as a move tight end. That was running from the interior, a slot receiver role type thing, as opposed to being basically a split end receiver, which is what he was in college. So that was good to see from Bucky Hodges for sure. I think that the dart down the middle of the field where Heineke finally got the Vikings on the board for a touchdown, I think that proves enough to me that the potential is still there, and this race for the backup quarterback job is going to go all the way to the end of the preseason. But I'm with you guys. I think that right now it's Keenum's job to lose, but Heineke is quickly starting to progress and start to get back into the form that we saw a couple years ago, the form that I base all of my very lofty opinions on him. I think we're starting to get that back a little bit. I think you saw a little bit of a microcosm of what he could be with some more time back there, with a better offensive line, and just in a better situation altogether. I think that you could see Keenum. I think you could see him take over the job from Keenum here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, see, I think this competition's over. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've said this all along. I think Keenum's your guy if you're banking on any type of injury being like a 2, 3, 4 game situation with Bradford. And I think that's where the Vikings are as a team. They want, if Bradford's done for the season, they're like, well, we're going to go all in on this season, and if that's what happens, he gets a season-ending injury, then that's our season.
Yep.
But if they have a short-term injury, I think they have Keenum is a guy that they can rely on to possibly win a couple of those games that Bradford misses. So I think Keenum's their guy pretty definitively here.
I think, honestly, dude, I want to cut in real quick and just say that the fact that there has been such impressive play from guys like Tayshaun Bauer and Stacey Coley at the back end of these like wide receiver and defensive line depth charts only hurts the chance of the Vikings keeping 3 quarterbacks, right? If Sam's healthy and they decide to go all in on Sam and basically, like you said, say screw it if he gets hurt, which I think a lot of teams do that. I can't remember what coach it was that said, why is Peyton Manning still out there? And he was like, because if 18 goes down, we're effed, and we don't practice effed. I can't remember which coach it was that said that, but that's a real line of thinking, and it's probably the best way to go here is to go all in on Bradford and only keep one backup quarterback. Try to stash Taylor Heineke on the practice squad. This is what I'm thinking at this point. And because you need to have that extra spot for a guy like Tayshaun Bauer, because
that's a good point.
I mean, who would you rather have when knowing what you do about Teddy Bridgewater as well? Who would you rather have for the future? Tayshaun Bauer, a pass rusher, a guy that can really get after the quarterback and has shown some impressive potential, or Taylor Heineke, who hasn't really shown you a whole lot. If that's what it comes down to, I mean, a third QB or a 6th defensive end, what are you going to do? I'd take the 6th defensive end.
I mean, I think at this point that controversial roster spot isn't about Bauer or maybe even not about Coley. I think you're talking about, if you add a 4th tight end and you have, Kyle Carter, Hodges, Morgan,
Truesdale,
and then you also add C.J. Ham at fullback. Maybe it's one of those situations, or maybe it's keeping like a 7th linebacker or another cornerback, 6 cornerbacks. I mean, Terrell Singfield maybe. Yep. Maybe I think it's more of one of those because I think Tayshaun Bauer has been that good where is almost definitively on the roster and it's not a borderline bubble player anymore.
I'm sure that a lot of other teams are like licking their chaps at the potential of the Vikings cutting Tayshaun Bauer. Just because you see that pass rushing potential, and I mean, not that many teams. The Vikings, I think Vikings fans are a little bit watered down to what it's really like in terms of having edge rushers because the Vikings have so many. I mean, Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter, Brian Robinson, Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith comes off the edge well. You list all of these different guys. Stephen Weatherly's been very good. Linval Joseph gets from the interior. The Vikings are able to get a pass rush like pretty much – they probably get as good of a pass rush as any team in the NFL, to be quite honest with you. So to have this abundance of pass rushers is both a blessing and a curse, but I think Vikings fans don't understand that there are so many teams that can't pass rush at all. Like they don't have one guy that can get after the quarterback consistently. So a guy like Tayshaun Bauer pops up on your radar as a potential cut because you look at the Vikings' depth at defensive end and you think, all right, maybe this guy could end up and hit the waiver wire. Yeah. He's going to get claimed real fast. So I think I'm with you, Drew. I think that he's basically pushed himself into being a roster lock. And honestly, the point that I was, that kind of spawned this conversation, the Vikings, I think they have to only keep 2 QBs. And right now, as much as I'd love to say that Taylor Heineke is going to be the guy, I thought that he was impressive in this game and showed, that potential that I like seeing, and I want to see some more of it. But right now, I think you got to keep Case Keenum. I don't think it's over yet. I disagree with you in that regard, but I do think that Taylor Heineke finds himself with his back against the wall heading into this 3rd week, at least. Let's put it that way.
Well, I think we need to keep in mind, too, that the starters are going to play 3 quarters of the next game here?
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume Keenum then gets the 4th quarter. So will Heineke even get a chance to prove himself in the 3rd game, or will it just be all on the line here in the final preseason game of the week 4 of the preseason? I mean, I just don't think there's enough time, enough reps, enough playing. I mean, there's not enough time available for Heineke to prove himself to make that kind of a jump up to where Keenum is in the quarterback depth chart. So,
but let's just keep in mind that heading into that week 4 2 years ago, I don't think a lot of people were willing to put Heineke.
Yeah, that's true.
And then he comes out and has that unbelievable performance. Then it's all of a sudden he's forced onto that 53-man roster. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that right now it's Keenum's job to lose, and I think the Vikings probably ultimately will only keep 2 quarterbacks. But I guess time, we'll see. Time will tell with some of this stuff, and it's important to keep this all in perspective to some degree because there are 2 games left. But I think Drew's point is valid here that if Keenum does get the entire fourth quarter against San Francisco, what does that mean for Taylor Heineke? Because that may say it all, honestly. It may start telling you that this team is ready to move on with only 2 quarterbacks. I mean, there's a reason why they cut Wes Lunt really early in camp because they wanted to limit their quarterback reps to 3 guys. So I guess we'll see. I'm still optimistic with Heineke, but I guess I understand where you're at as well. I can certainly it certainly makes sense. He has not been great, though. I do think he did flash it a little bit on that final drive with the touchdown to Bucky Hodges. So let's finish up this episode with our final takeaways from this game. Something that, guys, we'll do the same thing we did last time. Your positive, negative, positive sandwich, right? So 1 positive thing, 1 negative. It could be a player. It can be something specifically. It could be a scheme thing that you noticed, but 1 positive, 1 negative, 1 positive, sandwich it all together. Let's hear it.
All right, 1 positive. I guess this is going to be stuff we've kind of already talked about here. But I think I'll go 1 positive. I'll just say the rookies, especially the ones that the Vikings had drafted. Dalvin Cook looked like a featured back. Pat Elflein, I thought was phenomenal, both in the run game and as pass protector. Jaleel Johnson, phenomenal against the run. He looks like a first-team run stuffer.
Yep.
And then Bucky Hodges, a couple of nice catches down the field one of them for a touchdown. Stacey Coley looked like a really good receiver. Obviously had the 1 drop, but the route running again, pristine. You talked about Nefedio Denedbo. The draft picks this year in this preseason game, I think they showed out, and Spielman should be proud of those picks. The negative, I guess, Mackenzie Alexander or the cornerback depth. I mean, you have the injury to Newman, you have Wayne's already hurt. There's been talk of adding another guy, and I think the Vikings missed their chance on Tremaine Brock. The depth is suddenly very concerning outside of Xavier Rhodes. I think you have to either A, get healthy, or B, add somebody else that's reliable and is not Marcus Sherrills. And then I guess the positive to wrap it up here, I guess I'll say Sam Bradford. I mean,
yep.
He got off to a really good start against that Seattle secondary. Again, it's preseason. It doesn't. I mean, we don't really know how much to take away from it. But I thought he took a couple shots down the field. Stephon Diggs and he both showed some really good chemistry. So I liked what I saw there. But that's kind of my takeaway sandwich, if you will.
It sounds good to me. All right, so I'll start with a positive with the wide receiver group as a whole. So top to bottom, I think that Adam Thielen is really the only guy that we haven't heard a whole lot from. I've got no concerns with Adam Thielen. Just wanted to point out that he's really the only guy that I haven't seen a whole lot of from that wide receiver group. I'd like to see more from Caleb Jones, given that I'm kind of in on his shtick. But I really liked what I saw from Jarius Wright. Again, Michael Floyd looked great with the first team. I thought that he continues to prove what a threat he can be once he is on the field off of his suspension. Stacey Coley and then Stephon Diggs. I mean, he looks like a true blue number 1 receiver. So wide receiver group as a whole gets a positive from me. Negative. Just stopping the run in general. The defense has not been good at stopping the run. I think Jaleel Johnson has been very good as an individual, but we saw last week against Buffalo they had some trouble with it. I mean, Russell Wilson was running a little bit this week. Converging off the edge is great, but if you can't get it up the middle, that's a real problem. So, guys like DeTone Jones and Will Sutton, they need to really step up if they want to earn a spot on this team. So just as a negative, I'm just not a huge fan of what the run defense is doing. I think this defense is on track to be a top top 3-ish unit, but they still have some kinks to work out during these last couple of weeks during the preseason. And finally, as a positive, the offensive line. Hey, they looked pretty good out there. I thought Rashad Hill had a nice day. I thought Mike Remmers had a pretty nice day. Drew mentioned that Pat Alfine looked pretty good. I would also extend
Mike Remmers, by the way, Mike Remmers as a run blocker, very good.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I thought the offensive line as a whole was much better, both the first team and second team units. Maybe that's just not having TJ Clemmings in there. Maybe that's the difference. Who knows? But it was just overall, I was very excited with what we saw from the offensive line. I think that this performance, while it was a loss, I think that doesn't matter. I think this is a better overall team performance than the last one. Just as a whole, I was very excited with this team's performance. I think that there are certainly things to work on, but if you start finishing some of those drives that they had towards the beginning with Sam Bradford at the helm and Stephon Diggs running train, I think there's a lot to be excited about with this offense. The defense, as always, allowed under 21 points. So you hit that 21-point number, you start looking pretty good. Before we wrap up the show, I want to talk about Blair Walsh, since neither of us.
I was actually gonna add that at the end here.
Neither of us talked about him, so just overall, what did you think of Blair Walsh? Apparently, he was provoked by the Vikings sideline and was responding. Do you care about this at all? Do you buy into any of the slander that's going out there with Blair Walsh right now? Did it bug you? What are your thoughts?
It doesn't bug me. I mean, if a Vikings player or one of his ex-teammates or whatever is giving him slander, it's because he missed a 27-yard field goal that would have won the Vikings a playoff game at home. That's why that's probably happening. So, a 52-yard field goal in preseason is still not going to change that, and it's really not going to sway anything in your favor. So, if I'm him, I don't do that. But again, I mean, it's preseason, it's trash talk. It's probably just for fun anyway.
Yeah, we're probably as fans reading too much into it. Yeah, I think they were probably just having fun, to be quite honest. And I think that people are just looking at it because they can't hear what's being said on the field. They're looking at it like, oh, he's being a hot dog. He's making a big deal out of a preseason kick. I bet you it was probably nothing like that. I'm sure he was just having fun. I don't think there was any malice in there at all. I don't care. I love Blair Walsh as a competitor. I think that kind of stuff is fun. I think the theatrics are fun. It adds something to talk about. It's a talking point for us in this show. The fact that he was animated out on the field, and he looked good out there. The first kick was a little bit questionable, but the second two that he put through the uprights from 50 plus, looking like the Blair Walsh of old, and maybe helping Drew's thought that he's going to redeem himself this season. So.
He will.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that take. I'm okay with that take. I'm just I'm not going to speak with too much conviction just yet. I do like what I saw from Blair Walsh though, and I don't have a problem with him. For those of you that dislike Blair Walsh, get over yourself. I mean, he's having fun out there. He's being a competitor. He's a fun.
It's sports.
It's sports. It's supposed to be fun. Yeah, it's supposed to be fun. Let's keep that in mind. And with that said, that is the end of the show here. As always, you can find us at VikingsTerritory.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio. Make sure to check out our sponsors, both the Twin Cities Directory and Black Stack Brewing. We will have a live show later on this week to preview the San Francisco game, and then we will also be live from Black Stack Brewing for the post, immediately following the game. So join us at Black Stack to watch that game, because it will be on that huge, 170-ish inch projector screen on the wall there.
A lot of inches.
Yeah, a lot of inches. Should be a lot of fun. So join us there for the post game, and make sure to check us out on Mixer later on this week for the live preview, and we'll get back on our regular schedule finally with the Vikings playing at normal times this week. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show. Make sure to find us on Twitter at VikingsATL Pod, and we will catch you guys later on this week.